Asylum, Chapter 3. Twilight stared back at her friend through eyes so wide they could be mistaken for saucers. She hadn't wanted to believe what her ears had been telling her. The fog from before had returned with a vengeance, the thick strands of discordant thought gumming up the walks of her brain until it felt as though it had stalled. It couldn't be true, but it was regardless. She narrowed her eyes to mere slits. She was struggling with another painful paradox, once again feeling as though she was slowly being compressed into a single point of disbelief. She was staring at a living impossibility, an existential threat to her memory's given life. It wasn't a pleasant experience. The mare looked exactly like Applejack. The coat, the mane, the freckles, the cutie mark, everything was as Twilight remembered. Those familiar green eyes met her worried glance with a look of concern. Instead of a dusty Stetson, the cowgirl went headless, her blonde ponytail resting on a lab coat identical to Dr. Rose's. Applejack kept her smile plastered on her face as Twilight mutely scrutinized the orange mare, failing to mask the disquiet at the odd examination. The heavy silence continued to grow more ferocious until it threatened to consume all three ponies. So, I know you probably don't remember me, Twilight, Applejack said with a cough. She took a few cautious steps toward her, as if Twilight was a farm animal she didn't want to risk spooking. Except for the worried slant of her eyebrows and the slight tremor at the corner of her lips, everything in her body language presented a calm and reassuring image. My name is Dr. Applejack, but you don't have to worry none about that title. Applejack is fine, or even AJ if you want. Applejack's voice had pierced the silence, and into the void rose 1,000 voices speaking at once. Twilight's mind became an opera hall beset by a bellicose chorus, every singer attempting to drown out the other with their own song. It was a cacophony of different theories and disorganized guesswork, the pure noise enough to squash anything else. Changelings, I'm sure of it. It was the only answer that made sense. Every aspect of Applejack's behavior, the way she walked, the way she held herself, was too perfect to be anything else. The only element that didn't fit was the accent. It was there, just muted. It was a near flawless imitation otherwise, but it still wasn't good enough. Now if only I could remove whatever is on my horn, I could expose those insects for what they really are. I could fight back, and then... Twilight continued to sit mutely, the only movement that of her head as she tracked Applejack's progress across the room. Applejack glanced at Dreamer, arching an eyebrow in confusion. The stallion shrugged. She was talking just before you came in, he pointed out. Let's just give her a minute. Brainwashed, I'm sure of it. They could have gone to Applejack first. If they were going to all this effort to deceive me, they could have easily have done the same thing with my friend. They could have brainwashed Applejack, tricked her into believing the lies. Once they got her to believe it, they could then use her to convince the rest of us as well, slowly brainwashing us all one at a time. I just need to break through to her, convince her that... Twilight, darling, are you feeling okay? She asked. Discord, I'm sure of it. This whole experience just screams of his chaotic magic. He has returned, but this time decided to get rid of the elements first, before we had a chance to act. And instead of just cursing us, he's trying to break our will to resist. If we give in to the delusions and accept them, then we will never escape. I just need to try and find a hole in his deception. Twilight? Dreamer echoed Applejack, joining his fellow doctor to watch Twilight carefully. Come on, Twilight, say something. Magical curse, I'm sure of it. This is too weird to be a simple deception. Right now I'm probably sitting in a real hospital suffering some sort of arcane affliction. This world is just a twisted nightmare created from my own memories. But then, if I'm really sick, how can I escape? Or am I just trapped here until the real doctors manage to cure me? No, if this is a magical illness, it can still be affected by the mind, so I can... Twilight! Twilight jerked up and glanced blindly around her, as if awoken from a nap she didn't realize she was taking. The crowd of voices dropped away to a low buzz, a persistent mosquito, content to simply circle at the back of her mind. She found both ponies standing before her with matching expressions of worry. Twilight, are you feeling okay? Applejack repeated in a normal tone, her eyes roaming over Twilight's face. It took Twilight a moment to find her voice. Yes, I'm fine, Applejack, I'm fine. Really, I'm perfectly fine. Oh, so you remember her? Dreamer asked, a hint of relief sliding across both doctors' faces. Yes, I remember you, Applejack. said Twilight, nodding at her friend. Technically, it was half true. Applejack's face split into a broad grin. It was the first honest smile Twilight had seen in a while. Oh, well, that's a blessing. But not everything's the same, she added slowly. Some things are different. Oh? Well, that's not unexpected, really. Amnesia is going to leave some gaps in your memory after all, the former farm pony said. How about we start off nice and easy then, Sugar Cube? You just ask me any questions you might have, and I'll do my best to answer them. Twilight paused. Which question first? She needed to test this Dr. Applejack and see what she knew. Any plans for escape required information before they could be formed. Seeking inspiration in a lifelong passion, the unicorn tried to recall how the hard-boiled detectives in her novels would have started an interrogation. Dozens of books flashed through her mind, each as useless as the last. Playing bad cop and slamming Applejack's head into a desk was not a viable option, for many reasons. Applejack continued watching her as the silence dragged on, threatening to become another awkwardly long moment. Twilight felt an irrational moment of panic. This was her opportunity to get information, and she was stuck as mute as a filly on her first day of school. She needed a question. Now. Where's your head? Twilight nearly shouted. Quiet followed the question. The two men stared blankly at one another, their expressions identical. Seriously? That's what I'm starting off with? Twilight felt like burying her head in her hooves as her cheeks flushed red. Improvisation was not one of her strong suits. Applejack's eyes twinkled in amusement, and even Dreamer was grinning. I don't really wear it when I'm on duty, Sugar Cube. It's not really suitable for sterile hospital work, if you know what I mean. That makes sense, said Twilight, doing her best to ignore the heat in her face. So, doctor, huh? When did this happen? I graduated from Manhattan School of Medicine 2 years ago. Since then, I've been taking my residency at Broadhoof. Twilight blinked. It was rude and unfair to her friend, she knew, but the idea of Applejack attending such a prestigious university, a medical school no less, was difficult for her to swallow. She couldn't picture the cowgirl doing research in a library. The thought of Applejack's golden mane almost hidden behind a large medical textbook was too foreign a concept to take seriously, and she nearly laughed. But Applejack was entirely serious. Whatever humor Twilight had felt melted away, replaced by a sense of creeping dread. Applejack was such a terrible liar. Twilight was certain that something of that deception would have presented itself. There was no doubt but no deceit on that face. So, I guess that Big Mac is running Sweet Apple Acres then? Hey, you remembered, Applejack declared, happily turning back to Dreamer. It sounds like she's getting better already, don't you think? Dreamer danced up from his watch and nodded in agreement. It sure does. Both ponies beamed at her with the same patronizing smiles all the doctors seemed to wear, their grins as fake as the hospital they walked in. They were obviously part of the official bedside manner, something meant to express a soothing air of calm friendliness. Instead, it made them seem like they were talking down to Twilight, treating her like a sick filly that needed to be dealt with carefully. The condescension inherent in those voices wasn't far from being deliberate mockery. Twilight's frustration fizzled away. It was annoying, but there wasn't much she could do about it short of screaming, which she was fairly sure wouldn't help her argument that she wasn't crazy. She shifted her thoughts elsewhere. Although it wasn't much, Twilight found some comfort in the idea that there was still a pony called Big Mac working on a farm. However twisted and confused this nightmare might be, at least some things were still the same. The farm's doing pretty well now too, Applejack continued. With my paycheck we are paying off the debt pretty fast. Debt? What debt? Twilight looked at Applejack disbelievingly. You've got more customers than you can handle. Since when did the apples have money problems? Applejack couldn't keep from rolling her eyes. From the loans, of course. Remember we were just talking about the bank loans a week ago and... She blinked. You would have no way of remembering that right now. It was a third stretch of awkward silence in as many minutes. Also this time it was Applejack's turn to blush. Right. I'm sorry, Sugar Cube. I guess I keep forgetting that you don't remember everything. Applejack coughed into her hoof. The painfully transparent attempt to mask her embarrassment just highlighting the pink flush of her cheeks instead. She really was a terrible liar. Well, we have debts for my education. Universities aren't cheap after all. So, if you went to medical school, then why is Big Mac stuck back on the farm? Why didn't he get to go to college? He's not stuck on the farm, Applejack snapped, her nostrils flaring. Twilight jerked back as if slapped, surprised by the venom in her friend's voice. She glanced at Dream in confusion, but he was already staring at his co-worker with a respectful frown. Applejack gasped. The angry fire in her eyes was snuffed out in a second, replaced by a look of shameful remorse. Oh, Twilight, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you like that. You didn't mean anything by that, and shoot. Even if you had known, it wouldn't have made it right. I should never have talked to you like that. Her voice echoed her shame as she apologized profusely, sounding as surprised by her outburst as Twilight had been. It's okay, Applejack, Twilight said, unable to keep confusion from seeping into her words. The apology was excessive. Sure, Applejack had been short with her, but she was acting as though she had. Twilight's eyes narrowed, her jaw clenching tight. She's acting like she had yet a little filly. Screaming and throwing a fit didn't seem as objectionable as before. No, it's not okay. I know you're upset and you have every right to be, Applejack sighed, failing to grasp the source of Twilight's sullen glare. She glanced down at her hoof sheepishly. Big Mac is a touchy subject, but I should never have reacted that way. You did nothing wrong, Twilight. It was rude and unprofessional, and I am plumb ashamed of myself. It's nothing, Applejack. Honestly, this wasn't that big of a deal, so no worries. Dreamer coughed softly, getting their attention. Well, AJ, like you said, Twilight just didn't know. So why don't you tell her all about it? It might help her to remember something of her own past if you were to talk about yours. He checked his watch again. Besides, you've got the time. Dinner isn't for another few hours. That's not a bad idea, actually. Applejack turned back to the unicorn, a hint of sadness peeking out from behind her smile, like a shy foal hiding behind its mother's legs. You don't remember it now, but we used to spend a lot of time talking. How about it, Twilight? Are you okay if I spend some time talking with you? I would appreciate that, Twilight answered with a modicum of sincerity. She needed information if she were to escape, and the two doctors seemed poised to offer her what she needed on a gilded platter. As the great General Napolitan once said, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Hopefully, whatever this other Applejack had to say about her past might shed some light on what had brought Twilight into this reality, dreamscape, nightmare. Would, Twilight decided. It seemed the most fitting. After all, this isn't reality and you wake up from nightmares eventually. With the terminology sorted out, Twilight readjusted her mental checklist accordingly. After years of doing things methodically and with fastidious attention to her detail, the use of lists to organize her personal life had become a near compulsion. Habit! It's not a compulsion, but a habit. She didn't care what Dr. Rose said. She did not have obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. Diligence and foresight are virtues, she thought, hammering the point home with a finality born of righteous desperation. When Spike had teased her about her habits, it had been a joke between good friends. But Dr. Rose's words, just like that terrible photograph, were personal attacks that called into question her very sanity. His groundless condemnation of Twilight was slander of the worst kind. Well then, just let me get comfortable first, and then I tell you all the stuff you might not remember, Applejack said as she cheerfully slid the chair out from beneath the desk. It was as worn and pitted as the rest of the room's furniture, and there was a moment's doubt that the spindly wooden legs could support the mare's weight when she planted it beside Twilight's bed. It whimpered as she settled onto it, but after a few trembling protests it held steady. And then Applejack began to talk.